The resistance still grows, the resistance still builds. I don't want people to get discouraged because that's kind of the whole point. You hand over your rights so that they won't, continue to point guns in your faces to take them. But speaking of guns, check this out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You live in the neighborhood?
Yep, this is my block, this is my area. I don't go into other people's neighborhoods and try and intimidate them. I protect my people.
Are you giving out your name?
No, I'm okay with that. Our neighborhood's showing up.
You guys had a lot of people out here, right?
At least 30 or more.
Yeah.
40 or 50.
That's pretty good for a quick turnout.
Are all 30 or 40 to 50 strapped up like this guy is, holding down his block? That's just basically what he's saying. Holding down the block here. This is my block. I don't go to someone else's block. I got my rifle. There's also debates all the time about which kinds of guns people have, whether or not it's a legal open carry, whether or not that's a pistol because of something else on it. The point is he's got a deadly weapon strapped across his chest, waiting for anyone to show up to maybe start some more trouble. As I think is what was expected in this country to happen. That is, except for all the MAGA conservatives that were expecting all of their wishes of claiming that a bunch of libs are always weak sauce, wouldn't sit out and do the same things they do. Here's another scene. I'm not sure how clearly you guys could see that young man sitting on the trunk of that car in the middle of traffic, holding yet another big ass gun right on his lap. Just, I guess, looking to protect himself in this country where it's your right to do so against an invading army, specifically, even if it's a domestic invading army led by a fascist, traitorous president. There was folks who posted that and were all upset because obviously that's a black guy with a gun. We can't have that. That's dangerous. But when folks run around with zero training and the only objective they have is to harm people, kidnap folks off the streets, and then murder anyone else that gets in their way by way of Stephen Miller and Donald Trump saying they have complete and utter immunity on that. It's weird that that's what scares them. A guy sitting there not interfering with anyone, not aggressively snatching people's car doors open and trying to kick in their doors, just sitting there. Maybe the police officers could get involved a little bit more. Here's Brooklyn Park, up in Minnesota, Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley. He came with a few, revelations about what that's been happening and how now he wants it to stop.
What you won't hear from any of us today is rhetoric of abolish ICE or that there shouldn't be immigration enforcement. The truth is, immigration enforcement is necessary for our national security and for local security. But how it's done is extremely important. In fact, we have a long history of working exceptionally well with our federal partners, including ICE agents, and we have seen the best of them perform their job extremely well in the past. With that said, recently, as the last 2 weeks, we, as law enforcement community, have been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations in our streets from U.S. citizens. What we're hearing is they're being stopped in traffic stops or on the street with no cause and being forced to demand paperwork to determine if they are here legally.
Mark Bruley there speaking, all the obvious facts that we've been seeing for the past several months in this country. It's catching up, I guess. But did you notice? People like this, and even many politicians, probably the majority of them, always have to try and preface any kind of opposition they have to this illegal activity coming from this ICE and Border Patrol and the Bovino and Tom Homans of the world. They always have to preface their opposition to their illegal activities by saying that they support them and they don't want to abolish ICE. In fact, we work well with ICE. Well, are you working well with ICE right now? Is ICE working well with you, or are you getting an overwhelming number of phone calls from, citizens, residents, American citizens? It's an issue. So why can't you go straight to talking about what's going on with your citizens that you're supposed to serve and protect, rather than first, let me get this out of the way, you guys. I want to make sure you guys realize I'm in total support of ICE. I'm in support of ICE. That is, I guess I'll change my tune now. Then I have to talk about all of the 911 calls are being inundated with from people wondering where, the police are to protect them from, these criminals in the streets. I think it hit a little closer to home than Mark Bruley expected.
As this went on over the past 2 weeks, we started hearing from our police officers the same complaints as they fell victim to this while off duty. Every one of these individuals is a person of color who has had this happen to them. In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a U.S. citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, prevented her from recording it. The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction. And after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. This isn't just important because it happened to off-duty police officers, but what it did do is we know that our officers know what the Constitution is, they know what right and wrong is, and they know when people are being targeted, and that's what they were. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think of how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day.
Now, I didn't listen to the whole half-hour press conference. Maybe he got to the point where he was talking about how Brooklyn Park police are going to be standing against these illegal invaders that are attacking, their residents, their citizens, the people who, pay them. I wonder if he got to that point. I wonder if it's fully sinking in yet that, we've got this fascist, racist, white supremacist administration who's blatantly talking about how they're going to avoid all accountability. As a matter of fact, what Steve Miller posted was only federal officers are upholding the law, he says. Local and state police have been ordered to stand down and surrender. Stephen Miller says local, state, and police have to stand down and surrender. It's weird, when you talk about surrender, it's one of those things where it sounds like someone has invaded you and they've taken over, your country, your sovereignty, your land, and your citizens' rights. I wonder at what point we're going to do something about these folks who want law enforcement to surrender, the ones who say that they back the blue. Here's one of those Nazis who's helping run this whole thing. He's had to actually answer questions about what this Brooklyn Park police chief is talking about.
Earlier today, Brooklyn Park police chief said that his department is receiving endless of calls from American citizens saying that their civil rights are being violated by federal agents. And the police chief also went on to say that some of his off-duty officers are also being asked for their immigration status, and one officer was boxing. That's according to the police chief. I just wondered if you had a response for the Brooklyn Park police chief.
Sure. Again, our Border Patrol agents, ICE officers, and those allied federal law enforcement agencies are out there conducting Title VIII immigration, the Title VIII immigration mission. And I'll tell you, when you have a mayor and a police chief, O'Hara, that say call 911 when ICE or Border Patrol is in the neighborhood, and then they wonder why the 911 system is overwhelmed with superfluous calls for assistance when that is not true. So we're going to continue to be out in the community, and we're going to continue to conduct that mission, that legal, lawful Title VIII mission. And again, I've been out with my Border Patrol agents. Marcos is out constantly with his troops, and what I see out there is a very professional, prudent, and thoughtful law enforcement action. And if somebody needs to use the 911 system, then do it. But let's don't encourage anarchists to utilize a 911 system that hurts other Americans that may need to use that system. A law enforcement professional should know that.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Russ. But are stopping people. Are stopping people.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Sir, you talk about. Why don't you answer?
Greg Bovino can't answer the question. Greg Bovino was clearly asked about this specific occurrence where this police chief up in Brooklyn Park was talking about his officers being stopped, harassed, and detained. That is, until they had to identify themselves. I'm sorry, guns out on them as well. He didn't answer the question because he's too cowardly to answer the question. Instead, he runs on about some abuse of the 911 system, how anarchists shouldn't have use of it, because whoever these anarchists are that he's claiming they are don't have, rights, and completely ignoring all those secondary follow-up questions that probably asked him, yo, you didn't answer the question about whether or not you give a damn about how you guys are detaining law enforcement officers when they're not on duty, because when you don't see the badge and the uniform, suddenly they're just black and brown folks that we're supposed to, just terrorize. Here's more about Greg Bavino. He's got to keep answering questions about how they're not welcome in these cities, in these towns, in these areas, and specifically in certain stores. Watch him whine now, the little Nazi.
And this goes to anyone, not just those businesses and organizations. Don't fall victim. Don't fall victim to that heated rhetoric and those lies that are often spouted by, say, a Mayor Fry. Mayor Fry actually told his police force to fight federal agents in the city. And you should have even seen the look on O'Brien's face, Chief O'Brien. His eyebrows actually raised at that one. So don't fall victim to that. Our Border Patrol agents, our ICE officers, are parents. They're citizens. They enjoy the rule of law just like everyone else. So to deny them a cup of coffee or lawful commerce seems to be absolutely opposite of what we would expect in a lawful, orderly society. Did we like what happened with the church there a couple of days ago when individuals came in and disrupted almost violently a church service? Absolutely not. Same thing. We should treat each other with respect, dignity, and that is why we are here in this city as we take those violent criminals off the streets. That's respect and dignity.
Suddenly, Greg Bavino wants to be treated with respect and dignity by people who can serve him some coffee, put his guys in a hotel room, maybe sell them a couple Slim Jims and a Mike and Ike's. That's what he wants, apparently, from folks who they continue to pull guns in their faces, running around and rummaging through people's lives and expecting respect when they don't give any of it. This may be the reasons why the tides are turning. We got folks hanging out with guns on their front lawns, and we've got convenience stores and hotels and restaurants kicking these guys out, is because finally people are realizing it.
These numbers have just completely flipped. This was such a strength for the President of the United States. The net approval rating on Trump's administration program to deport immigrants who are in the country illegally. It was plus 18 points at the beginning of his presidency, net approval rating. That is very, very positive. It was one of the most popular things in the Trump administration agenda. But now you come over to this side of the screen. Look at that. That's over a 25-point switcheroo in the negative direction. Now the program is way, way, way underwater at minus 8 points. And among independents, John, it has gone from plus 18 points in the positive all the way down to negative 20 points. The Trump administration, and Trump in particular, has lost the center of the electorate when it comes to a key component of his administration's agenda.
Harry Hinton there with the numbers, they're going way down and off to the side, way down. I show Harry Hinton just for the craziness, the arm motions. But the point is well taken. Look at how much this swing has happened. And again, I don't feel like we need to have all these polls to get this straight in our heads, that when you see a bunch of illegal guys with guns out in the streets running around and pointing at people and breaking the laws and violating the Constitution, that people aren't going to like that. And the people who do like it knew that that's what's coming. But their excuses are even falling apart. Remember, it's supposed to be all the violent criminals, all the gang members, the rapists, the drug dealers, and the people who run up in your kid's room.
I want to make it clear that 73.6%, and that's actually a statistic that's been confirmed by two separate independent organizations, of the people that are currently in ICE detention have no criminal record. And in fact, according to the Texas statistics, actually less than 1% of illegal immigrants who are in this country, or illegal or undocumented, which is two different categories, have ever been arrested for a violent crime. So when she's saying that they're picking up all of these people who are criminals, that's not true. It's just wrong. And to characterize them all as violent is just wrong. And the reason that they would do that would be because it would make it easier for people to say, you know what, whatever human rights violations are occurring, we don't really care because they're all just criminals. We can just say goodbye to them because they don't matter. So I just want to encourage people to remember that that's not who we're attacking. By the way, we also have arrested 172 U.S. citizens.
I'd be curious to get into some of those statistics. Of course, Madeline, you're well versed in the statistics. I would love to know who those sources are with respect to coming out with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the Cato Institute and Trace. The Cato Institute and Trace looked at ICE data, and they got the same stat.
Okay.
I wonder if the Newsmax anchor is still curious about the sourcing of that information and also the reality that she continues to ignore. It's not going to work out for you. Again, it's why it's easy. It should be straightforward when you have the facts on your side to come to the conclusions that you've got without just relying on Donald Trump and Stephen Miller to tell you what your reality is.